Hello, Jar of Marble dwellers and Jar of Marble curious. My name is Linda and this is Jar of Marbles. I hope that this finds you well and that your day has been a good one, and I'm just so glad that you're here. I was just thinking this week about the 80s and the comparison with, things nobody said in the 80s, because of course it was a different era, it was a different psyche, it was a different language, time, you name it. I mean, the 80s. So in 1980, I was 19 years old and life was work and party. Sure, sleep was in there somewhere, but that period of time holds the most wonderful memories. It was a time when I was in a rock band, out flatting, always somewhere to go and lovely friends, and we were all too young and free to really have any hang-ups or agendas. Hell, none of us even knew what an agenda was. So young, so naive, and no thoughts of the future. It was just such a really special time. We had great friends and friends with their friends, invited to all the parties, whether they were surfies, hippies, musos, the stoners, straights, punks, and everything in between. I remember feeling pretty lucky that I could walk anywhere, like as in go to any party and just always have fun. It was just a time where, people just loved people coming to their parties, and parties, it would seem there was a period of time where they were everywhere and nearly every weekend, and we didn't have any way of communicating, parties except, word of mouth. Like they weren't in the newspaper or anything like that. And obviously mobile phones, computers were just not a thing. And so if you were at a pub seeing a band, the news of a party would be passed around and that would be it, and where we would be going when the pub closed. And as you can imagine, that just got me thinking about how much, so much has changed. So much of our life has changed, our lives, our accesses, our lingo, language, questions we ask, statements we make, our expectations, experiences, and mostly our intolerance and so-called punishments. How was life different in the 1980s, you may ask? Well, the 1980s, often remembered for its materialism and consumerism, also saw the rise of the yuppie, an explosion of blockbuster movies and the emergence of cable networks like MTV, which introduced the music video and launched the careers of many iconic artists, and the emergence of the AIDS crisis, which will just go on. Fear, stigma and ignorance raged through societies, killing thousands of people who may only have had a few weeks or months from diagnosis to death, if they even managed to be diagnosed at all before they died. With no effective treatment available in the 1980s, there was little hope for those diagnosed with HIV, facing debilitating illness and certain death within years to live in the 80s. It really was quite a sad and scary time for so many of us. The 80s were an exhilarating time for music, fashion and culture. Young people were moving to big cities in droves and embodying the catchphrase, dress for success. By day, many people were driven, successful and put together. By night, the girls just wanted to have fun. Thank you, Cindy. Working remotely, for example, back in the 80s meant that you were working far away. You could have been at sea, you could have been in the bush. Either way, remotely meant you were working very, very far. And whereas now working remotely means you're working from home on your computer. And as we all know, that is a large slice of how it's working out in the not just the corporate world, but just regular admin style jobs where people are working from home because of the pandemic. It just changed the structure of society in so many ways. So moving on a little bit more with the 1980s, it's fair to say that it's really, really quite different. We would never say, for example, let's take a selfie for the gram, or do you have Venmo, a smartphone app to transfer money for those that don't know. We'd never say the internet is down again, or what even would an internet be? And when in a bind for spelling or anything really, we suggest Google. Or have you seen my phone charger? Only probably, so many times in your life. And someone says, DM me. How about being blocked on Facebook. Shopping has forever changed since the 80s because since then we buy many of our, not only clothes, but we buy so much online. We can ask our phones what the weather is going to be like to set alarms. And in the 80s, there's just no way. Really? No way, Bob. And so, don't eat till I take a pic of our dinner. I mean, really? I mean, of course, this is for us now, that is just the norm. Us asking hosts what their Wi-Fi password is, the saying, my bad, and asking, what are you binge watching? Like, as I was saying, the lingo's just changed so much. No one would know what you'd be asking if you said, look, just let me check my socials, my social media. Let's watch Netflix. Swipe right. Have you seen my AirPods? Being plant-based. I'm going off the grid. Or how about we met on Tinder? Or I just need to update my feed. Where I come from, a feed is a meal.
Oh, nobody ever said that in the 80s.
I know, right, Bob? How about my Uber is here? An Uber rhymes with goober. I could not even take that seriously when I first heard that. It was like, Uber? But, it's like everything after a while, it just rolls off your tongue and it just becomes your normal. So let's FaceTime. That's another goodie. Or don't call me, just text. I'm on 1%. Tag me in my post. Or TikTok. Made me buy it. Or I'm going to make a TikTok. DM me for price. I'll have a caramel macchiato almond milk. A latte on soy. I mean, really, nobody said that in the 80s. Snapchat. YOLO, hashtag. Well, you might have used a hashtag perhaps if you're typing, but you didn't go around saying hashtag. WTF, which streaming service is best? Wear a mask. I mean, honestly, what about what we learn on YouTube? Before COVID, where's my iPad? Send a tweet. Do you accept contactless or contactless? What about send me a friend request? Or change your passwords, or I've got 10,000 followers. I wish. Ringing someone and asking where they are. Again, no mobiles. We never had that as a possibility. Have you screenshot your homework and emailed it to your tutor? I mean, again, nobody ever said that in the 80s. Coming from the 80s in terms of being a teenager, the most hip thing I recall is a portable cassette player that took batteries. So you could take that to the beach. My father had not long got a cassette player in his car, which was, let me tell you, very mod squad. And in the 80s, you never heard anybody say, I've got 20 gigs of data left on my phone.
Yeah, nah, never in the 80s. You just wouldn't hear that in the 80s like ever. You just wouldn't.
That's right, Bob. That's what I'm saying. Bob, you sound like you've been drinking.
I haven't.
Yeah, I know, but you sound like you have. But anyway, on we go. I'm going to download the album. You never hear anybody say that ever. Your dad is on the way home. I can see him on Find My app. You can even watch a pizza being driven to you. Compared to an 80s upbringing, so much of this still has a certain amount of weirdness connected to it. Not that I don't have a bit of a romance with technology. I love tech a lot. But the breaches of privacy and the lunatics that troll the net have caused disastrous outcomes, truly sad and tragic events. But as I thought about the 80s and how much language alone has changed, it got me thinking about circa 1980. So I was just looking at a list of major events that happened at that time. And so there was the US defeats Soviet Union in ice hockey in what was labelled the Miracle on Ice. Mount St. Helens eruption on May the 18th in Washington, killing 57 people. The Iran-Iraq war begins in September of 1980. CNN, cable news network, began broadcasting on June the 1st. 3M begins sales of its latest product, Post-it notes, invented by Arthur Fry and Spencer Silver. The former Beatle, John Lennon, is shot to death. Do you remember that time? That was like so shocking, wasn't it? Severe summer heat wave in southern US causes 1,117 deaths in 20 states. The US passes Crude Oil Windfall Profits Tax Act to tax high profits by oil companies. Fire destroys the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas. The killer clown, John Wayne Gacy Jr., sentenced to death for the murder of 33 boys and young men. The former Beatles member John Lennon was shot and killed by obsessed fan Mark David Chapman outside of Lennon's apartment in Manhattan during December of 1980 at the age of 40. Lennon, beloved by many around the world for his talent as an artist and outspoken nature as a public figure, had given an autograph to Chapman earlier in the day and was returning home from a recording studio with his wife Yoko Ono at the time of the attack. And in the days following his death, hundreds of fans gathered outside of his apartment in mourning, and I was flatting, as it was called back in 1980, and I was sharing a house with two other guys and a girl, and I just remember when that news came out, it just seemed so surreal. Like, I think, where we came from, and because we were really young and not watching TV, I think that was like one of the most and first really tragic things that I'd ever heard of happening in the world. But while we were flatting, they were really great people and we had so many laughs. It was a 4-bedroom house. Rent and electricity was $16 a week each, and we all brought our own food. And Les was the oldest of all of us, the flatmates, and was just a really nice person. There was another guy called Tony, and he was just every bit as nice. So it got me thinking also about what kind of music was popular in the 1980s. And as you can imagine, oh my God, it was just a plethora of amazing artists and music: soft rock, glam metal, thrash metal, shred guitar characterised by heavy distortion, pinch harmonics and whammy bar abuse became very popular. Adult, contemporary, quiet storm and smooth jazz. I just loved that when I read that. I thought, oh my God, what a great description. Gained popularity in the late 1980s. Glam metal became the largest, most commercially successful brand of music worldwide. But I've got to list off some of the goodies here, because it really was quite a time. There was Blondie, Call Me, Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall, Magic, Olivia Newton-John, Rock With You, Michael Jackson, and She's Out of My Life, and Off the Wall, Do That to Me One More Time, Captain and Tennille, remember that one? Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Queen. Coming up, Paul McCartney, It's Still Rock and Roll to Me, Billy Joel, and he also had You May Be Right out as well. The Rose, Bette Midler, Cruisin', Smokey Robinson, Air Supply, Elton John, Christopher Cross, Upside Down by Diana Ross, Please Don't Go, Casey and the Sunshine Band, Don't Do Me Like That, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Fame, Irene Cara, One Fine Day, Carole King, Dim All the Lights, Donna Summer, Should Have Never Let You Go, Neil Sedaka, With Dara Sedaka, Pilot of the Airwaves, Charlie Dore. Like, honestly, the list goes on and on. There was Linda Ronstadt, Heartbreaker, Pat Benatar, Deja Vu, Dionne Warwick, Eddie Rabbitt, Supertramp, Fleetwood Mac, Daryl Hall and John Oates, George Benson, Kenny Rogers, Prince, Boz Skaggs, and Joe Walsh. Oh, the music was just amazing. It just fills my head with, with my heart with just fabulous memories where you just think, yeah, woo! But anyway, moving on. So, of course, many of these artists have since gone. And with Michael Jackson dying in 2009, and also actors Farrah Fawcett, David Carradine, Patrick Swayze, Freddie Mercury from Queen in 1991. I remember I was so saddened to hear that news that I put on We Are the Champions on full volume, opened up all the windows and watered my front garden, my dahlias actually, singing at the top of my lungs while crying. Kenny Rogers back in 2020, Kobe Bryant, Helen Reddy, Sean Connery and Eddie Van Halen, Olivia Newton-John, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II, Ivana Hump, that's terrible, but Ivana Trump, Sidney Poitier, Loretta Lynn, and many others. Tom Petty, 2017, John Moore, James Bond, Roger Moore, who played James Bond, 70s teen idol, David Cassidy, Mary Tyler Moore, And then, of course, beloved Prince, 2016, as well as David Bowie. 4 days later, Alan Rickman, Muhammad Ali, Gene Wilder, Donna Summer. We lost her in 2012, and Whitney Houston and Etta James. There were many more, of course, but I just thought there were so many just worth mentioning. George Benson, 2019, as well as Doris Day and Toni Morrison. And of the most recent times, Renee Geyer and the lovely Lisa Marie Presley. There's a thing now that's called killed by celebrity death hoax, where fake news is announced and then further statements come up to deny the death. It's kind of putrid. Again, not an 80s thing. There's far more BS to swim through to get to any kind of truth these days. Unfortunately, it can be very numbing. So I thought, right, we'll get away from that because that was a little bit, how's your father? So the top 10 fashion trends from the 80s has to be mentioned because the 80s has some kind of reputation fashion-wise, and usually most of it's not really very good. But we had the big hair, the perms and more perms. Some were outrageous. In fact, when I got one, I was forced to sit in the back of class because people couldn't see the board for my luscious hair. Oh well. Spandex, Lycra changed the world, and the 80s made sure it knew. Ripped knees, lacy shirts, leg warmers, high-waisted jeans, neon colours, mullets. Oh yes, it was a time, and it was a great time. I guess it was, it was a great time, and I guess it's like anything, isn't it? That, if you had a relatively good time in that era, you're going to go, oh, now that was just fantastic. I know, right? Thank you. I don't know why I'm saying thank you, but thank you. Anyway, the 1980s were possibly the boldest decade in modern fashion history, a magical era of over-the-top silhouettes and teased perms and saturated colours. Really? Well, yeah, Bob, don't you remember it?
No, not really.
No, you probably don't, but that's all right. They were the years of puffed shoulders and power suits, flashy skirts and spandex leggings, leg warmers and ample parachute pants. I was always pleased to see someone in those huge pants. They were most entertaining, and to be honest, I really admired anyone that actually, wore them. No, seriously, no. Seriously, I did. Anyway, moving on. Love them or loathe them, these trends are a clear sign that we're still a little bit obsessed with the 80s. Many 80s trends have resurfaced in recent seasons. I started observing around about a year ago just some of the hideous and not so flattering dresses, skirts and tops on mannequins. At first it was, oh God, the 80s are back, but how about on the runways, like Marc Jacobs, inflated shoulders, Gucci brought back glitter, and Tom Ford and J.W. Anderson added feathers to their ensembles. Celine, Louis Vuitton and Max Mara are a few of the many brands that have reimagined the big-shouldered and tailored power suit. And neon, it seems, is just as popular as ever. I was a suit jacket girl for years with jeans, high heels and T-shirt. I felt very comfortable, not too dressy and not too casual, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. No, really. Oh, thank you.
Oh, I didn't find that interesting at all. Who cares?
I do, Bob.
Oh.
Back in the 80s, you paid for long-distance calls. Do you remember that? And you had to call tolls who would connect you, and there was none of this just ringing someone up business. Maybe after you would have to untangle the telephone cord. But again, things that nobody said in the 80s. You didn't, hand your phone to someone else to, put their number in your phone. Of course, we didn't have mobile phones, so that didn't happen. You rang numbers from memory. Someone would give you their number, and if you didn't have pen and paper, you would commit it to memory. True story. But mind you, I remember my first phone number, the family, actually it was our second number that we ever had, and it was 4711, which turned out to be 4711, which is Tosca perfume. But it really was 4711. And I remember as I got a little bit older and someone would ask for my number and I'd go 4711, and they would always think that I'm making it up. And then as populations grew, they added a 4 at the beginning. So then it became 44711, Nobody still didn't believe that was my number. It's funny when you think about it, isn't it? All these little, twists and little turns and all the rest of it. Oh, no, thank you so much, thank you. But, and also you could smack the top of your television to improve reception. I mean, it didn't guarantee that the reception would improve, but if it was, getting staticky and lines were striking through it, it would always be usually the father or somebody would get up and bang the top of the TV, to try and get, as I say, the reception back. And also, we didn't have seatbelts in cars. And actually, back to TVs, if you missed your TV show, that was it. It was gone forever. Hashtag things nobody said in the 80s, because we just didn't have the internet. So this changes so many things straight away. Didn't have the internet, didn't have mobile phones. So we didn't have trolls and keyboard warriors spitting out their hatred and uneducated opinions. And I look at this sometimes for mere curiosity, and there's just no honour in it. In the 80s, you face people face to face when something needed sorted. There wasn't this covert stuff going on. Well, I mean, of course, there would have been, not very nice people not doing very nice things. I'm not saying that didn't exist, but it's just that the degree that it is now is just, it's just nowhere in a normal person's mind or heart. You go, well, yeah, well, that's normal. I hope someone kills himself if, I tell them that. It's like, it's just beyond ridiculous. So I think, it's simmering into another galaxy of what I still don't get, because you know what? There is nothing to get. And as we know, there is a price, with the internet, the downside. The upside is wonderful, and like any form of entertainment, unless it's your career, use it in moderation. Everything in moderation, unless, of course, it's fashion, skincare, and probably coffee. No, definitely coffee. I went on to think about how, memory pillows. Like, you said to someone back in the 80s, so have you got a memory pillow? I know. Thank you. I know. No. That's enough. Anyway, yeah. And I was thinking about, like how you would never lose your phone because it was attached to the wall, and you wouldn't have ever taken it in your car. Although there was a time once I did do that, because I think I do know what I was doing was I was driving to school to go and pick up my daughters from school, and I had a spare phone that I put in the back seat because I knew that when the kids would get in the car that they would see, the phone sitting there, and they would look at me with that look that they would get like, oh, what's our mother up to now? Because I was trying to make a point, because at that stage, mobile phones were really, starting to surface, and, 8-year-olds felt like they should have a phone. That was like a hard no, that is not going to happen. No. And when I went on to have a little look at, the inventions that didn't exist in the 1980s, that included GPS, MP3s, Sony PlayStation, and as we've discussed, Google and cell phones, digital cameras, and, DVD players, and wait for it, Viagra. I know, who knew, eh? And you know what? We've come to that time. It's the end of another podcast, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming to be with me. And just remember, that aging is not for the faint-hearted, and you can't polish a turd. And on those words, I want to bid thee farewell, and thank you kindly, as always, for coming to join me, and say good day to the family for me and the frilled neck lizard. God, I can't speak today. And I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.